Welcome to Daryl's Beekeeping Videos. I'm a master beekeeper, and tonight's lesson is on what you should be doing in your second year of beekeeping. As I stated in my first series of videos on beginner's beekeeping, and also I have a video on how to become a master beekeeper, this video will similarly follow the North Carolina State Beekeeper Association's Master Beekeeping Program for those of you who are going through the Master Beekeeping Program. It will also include items that are opinion-based, and those are my opinions and opinions of similarly minded beekeepers of what generally you can expect during your second year of beekeeping. During this video, I'll do the agenda is going to be a recap of your first year skills. If you watch my first video on beekeeping your first year, I talk a lot on what basically going through the Master Beekeepers Certified Beekeeper Program, as well as some additional skills that aren't included in that. Then I'm going to talk about where to learn those skills. Again, I'm going to briefly touch on the Master Beekeeping Program again. Again, I'm a very strong advocate or proponent of the Master Beekeeping Program because it's a self-guided program that will help you learn a lot through your beekeeping journey, especially your first few years. I'll talk about the Master Beekeeper subspecialties, and then we'll get into some of the things that you can have fun in your second year. Your first year was probably very confusing to you, probably flew by, and was probably very exciting. So for those of you who are sticking with it, beekeeping, congratulations on your first beekeeping year under your belt. Hopefully you got your bees survived through the year. If not, learn from your mistakes. Try to analyze what you did or didn't do that caused you to potentially lose some colonies. Here's a hint, we all lose colonies at some point. I got lucky my first year, and I went through my first season with 7 colonies, and I had no problems. The second year, I lost all but 1 or 2 years. The third year, I lost all but, again, 1 or 2 of my colonies, and eventually I figured out I have to take care of pests a lot more. And then I learned how to overwinter my bees better, and my learning curve became that much faster, and I'm able to recover quickly now should I get my bees in trouble. But I now have the skills that I can rapidly increase my numbers. For example, that first year, the second year that I was telling you about where I went down to 1 or 2 colonies, I went from literally 1 colony or 2 colonies, I can't remember the year, to 15 colonies in about 4 months. So with aggressive splits. Again, that's one of the skills I'll talk about that you should learn during your second year of beekeeping. So starting off, again, recap your first year skills. Again, the emphasis of your first year is basically teaching you how to use the tools, teaching you how to use the various protective equipment such as your suits, your gloves, your smoker, all these tools and protective gear. You should have used it throughout your apiary throughout the year and got very familiar with those. You should also have learned some basic management techniques, and depending on your apiary and your experiences, maybe you encountered some various pests such as small hive beetles or wax moths. My first year, I didn't have any problem with either one of those. They didn't know, apparently the small hive beetles and wax moths didn't find my apiary until the second year. Then they became a major problem. That was one of the reasons I lost so many hives, or so many colonies is proper terms. Remember, the hive is where they live, the colony are actually the bees. It's one of the reasons I lost so many, because I had serious varroa mite problems, and I had a lot of wax moth problems, and I had small hive beetles my third year. So again, you learn as you go. And then hopefully somebody talked you out of extracting honey your first year. If you did and you got away with it, good on you. But as a general rule of thumb, we generally advise new beekeepers to not extract honey the first year because your bees are needing that honey to get through their first winter. But again, if you did it and you got away with it, good on you. Now getting on to your second year. Now's the time that you can actually practice some of that, your honey extraction, if you choose to go down that route. Before I get into that, I want to talk about the Master's Beekeeping Program again. During your first year, hopefully as soon as you hit 4 months of beekeeping experience, hopefully you studied for and took your certified beekeeper test, both the practical and the written test. If not, during your second year, now's the time to do that. Again, because it teaches, the Master Beekeeping Program will teach you everything from history to pest management to management techniques of the colonies and the bees. It's a really good program. So if you didn't take your certified beekeeping exam during the first year, I highly recommend that you take it during your second year and then enter the Master Beekeeping Program and continue on down that journey. Hopefully someday I'll see you in the Master Beekeeper ranks or the Master Craftsman if you go higher than I am. Okay, so still in the Master Beekeeping Program topics, in your second year, now's the time to start studying for your journeyman's exam. Remember, if you watch my How to Become a Master Beekeeper video, I talk about all the 4 levels of the Master Beekeeping Program in the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association's Master Beekeeping Program. So remember, in the North Carolina Master Beekeepers Program, you have to have a minimum of 2 years beekeeping experience before you can take your journeyman's test. So in your second year, now's the time to start studying for that. And you need to, in your second and third years and beyond, is a time where you need to really delve into scientific terminology and science-based beekeeping. One, it will help you understand what's going on inside the hive and allow you to make better informed decisions whenever you see a problem in a hive or inside of a colony. You'll be able to quickly diagnose it and figure out, if you know the cause and effect of what you see, then you know what management techniques to apply against that to treat it or fix the problem. For example, if I see a deformed wing virus, I know that's caused by a varroa mite. Again, because it's a disease passed through, vectored through the varroa mite. When a varroa mite goes and bites on the honeybee to suck on the hemolymph, or excuse me, the fat bodies, we used to think the hemolymph, now it's actually they're sucking on the fat bodies. The varroa mite can actually vector other diseases in that process, and one of those is the deformed wing virus. So if you see deformed wings, as you go, and again, if you watch my video on how to inspect a hive, I talk about some of these various things as well, what you're seeing. One of them is deformed wing virus. You'll know, I've got a serious varroa mite infestation. Whether I have tested for it or not, I've got a problem, and I know to go ahead and test for the mites, either using the alcohol wash method or the powdered sugar method to test for varroa mites, and then depending on the threshold, the mite thresholds. But again, if you've got deformed wing virus, you've got a serious varroa mite problem, and you know that you're going to have to treat. All right, so in addition to that, where are you going to learn these skills? So we talked briefly about the Master Beekeeping Program. So now where are you going to learn these second year skills? So as I just alluded to, if you go through the Master Beekeeping Program, they're going to list a bunch of references. And again, watch my Master Beekeeping Program video. It will tell you, so I'll actually show you the books that they recommend in the Master Beekeeping Program. So order those books and read them and study them. The other thing you can do is to learn these skills that you will need for your second year, not only if you're going through the Master Beekeeping Program, but also the skills in general that you're going to should acquire throughout your second year, is go to your local chapters, and then I guarantee within your chapter, there are people that have expertise on some of the things I'm going to talk about, such as honey extraction, making products of the hive, such as using the beeswax to make maybe soaps or cosmetics. There are people in your local chapter that will have those skills that can help mentor you through that process, as well as some of these books I'm going to talk about as I get to that portion of the video tonight. But again, your local chapters will have it, especially if you join a chapter that is very good at entering the state fair competition. For example, I'm in North Carolina. I'm in a couple different chapters, one in Moore County, and I'm on one at 5 county beekeeper associations. They were chapter a year a few years ago, and they win a lot of the competitions at the North Carolina state fairs because they have an aggressive, very conducive club where they teach each other how to make and enter some of these competition items. So again, we've got a person who's really good at making honey mead. We've got other members of our chapter who are very good at making candles and things like that. And they, during some of the meetings, they will actually teach the members of the club how to do that. So again, I can't emphasize enough joining your local chapter and seeking out local expertise. The other thing you can do is you can watch some of my videos on the basic stuff. Some of the things I'm going to talk about as this upcoming year, one of my Round to It projects is teaching how to do splits, how to do combining hives, and things like that. All these basic skills that you're going to need for your second video. If you look up my Facebook page, which is Beekeepers United Group, if you go in there, it's all free. If you go in there, I've got lessons there's a guides section. If you go in there, I've got lessons on how to combine colonies, how to make your own equipment. I've got articles in the files section on how to make your own equipment. So again, seek out some of these resources. The other thing you can do is you can look up reputable YouTube videos. I mentioned earlier in the first year beekeeping video that I made, a lady named Virginia Webb out of Georgia. She has excellent videos on how to enter and win honey competitions. That's everything from bulk wax products to candles to the various honey categories, extracted honey, chunk honey, cut comb honey. This lady is a world-class judge, and you'll learn a lot on her videos. I think she's got like 5 or 6 videos out. They are all excellent. The other thing you can do is you can go to some educational sites, such as universities and college. Again, I've referenced before the University of Guelph in Canada, because they've got good videos on how to make splits, swarm prevention, and things like that. These are all good sites that you can go to. Again, that's not all limiting. Again, I talked about briefly in the other video, Randy Oliver's sites, scientificbeekeeping.com. Again, another good site for science-based beekeeping. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is, for your second year skills, is the common skills that everybody does. I briefly talked about the Master Beekeeping Program. Now we're going to talk about the common skills that the Master Beekeeping Program doesn't necessarily cover. And if you're not interested in going to the Master Beekeeping Program, these are skills that you should learn somewhere, preferably your second year, if you didn't learn some of these by force, your first year. So the first thing you should do, even if you're not going through the Master Beekeeping Program, you should start learning anatomy and physiology and some scientific terminology, because it will help you understand what's going on whenever you see a problem, as I stated earlier. So some of those books that will help you do that is, again, now if you haven't done so the first year, like I recommended, now's the year you should probably read The Hive and Honeybee. Again, I'm not affiliated with these people, but it is an excellent book. It walks you through all phases of the honeybee operation, from everything from history to extraction to equipment to management to anatomy and physiology. It's a really, really good book. It also covers some diseases and pests. And again, it's one of the books listed in the Master Beekeeping Program. Another book that's really good to help you with that process, learning management techniques and pests and diseases, is, again, it's in the Master Beekeeping book as well, is the Beekeepers Handbook by Diana Samataro. Again, I know I butchered her name, but this is the book. It's really good as well. And then another one is by Lawrence John Connor, called Bee-sentials. It's another good book that covers a lot of pests and diseases. It covers swarms. It's another good book to have. All right. The next, so again, step one is learning some scientific terminology and science-based beekeeping, anatomy and physiology, and reading the various books. Second thing is, in your second year, if you didn't learn it in your first year, you should learn how to do varroa mite counts. Knowing what your varroa mite counts are is important, because if you have a high varroa count, your increasing the chances of your bees not surviving the winter, because you'll go into the fall with weak colonies or diseased colonies, and the fall bees are the ones that are making the winter bees. They're the ones that are feeding that. Remember I talked to you earlier in the first video about an enzyme called vitellogenin. I believe it's an enzyme, but don't hold me to that. But the item is vitellogenin, and it's your winter bees. And vitellogenin is what causes the winter bees to live longer than the summer bees. So if you go into the fall with a diseased colony, a weak colony, because you have a high varroa mite count, chances are is your bees aren't going to come out of the winter. So again, you need to know what your varroa mite counts. General rule of thumb is when to treat for mites is when you have 3% or higher. Again, there are a lot of videos on how to do varroa mite counts. If you go to the Honeybee Health Coalition and the Bee Informed program, Bee Informed Partnership, they will have videos on these things, especially the Honeybee Health Coalition. They have a pamphlet out there on how to do the varroa mite counts by the alcohol wash method and the powdered sugar method. And they also have videos, if I remember correctly, as well. So again, learn the two different techniques and see what works for you, which one you prefer. If you use the alcohol wash method, you're going to kill about 200 bees. When you got a colony of 60,000 to 100,000 honeybees, 200 is a drop in the bucket. It sucks if you're those 200 bees, but in a greater scheme of your colony, it really doesn't impact them. If you don't want to kill your bees, you can use the powdered sugar shake method for varroa mite counts. Just realize it's not as accurate as the alcohol wash method, but it still gives you a pretty good indication, and it's one of the accepted methods. Again, so if you have a threshold of 3%, then you know to treat for 3% of mites, then you know to go ahead and treat for varroa mites. Commercial beekeepers actually treat when they have 1%. So it depends on where you, remember I was talking about in the previous video, whether you're a hobbyist, which most of us are, or sideliner, or commercial beekeeper. Commercial beekeepers treat when it's 1%, so they can have strong bees thriving throughout the winter. Okay, so next thing we talked about studying different books. Next thing was varroa mite counts. Next thing you want to learn is about swarms. So you need to learn both swarm prevention. So you need to look up videos on the Demery method, Demery method. And again, I'll try to put a caption above explaining what that is. The name of Demery method of swarm prevention. Again, coming this spring, I'll try to create a video on that. So if you see swarm cells, then that's when you apply the Demery method of swarm prevention. The other thing is if you want to capture swarms, that's also a good skill to do. So again, join your local chapter and ask to be put on the swarm capture list, on the swarm list, because what they do is they work with fire departments. Your local bee chapter works with local fire departments, police departments, and your local agricultural department, and they provide them with a swarm capture list so that if somebody calls in and says, hey, I've got a swarm, those entities know to contact the local beekeeping chapter, and then from there, the point of contacts on that list will then go down the list and ask people if they're interested in going and get a swarm. So again, if you capture swarms, it's free bees. Just realize that those bees may have varroa mites, so you'll have to treat those fairly quickly. And then you will have to decide if you do get after swarms, do you want to just capture swarms that are out in the open, or do you want to go and get swarms and bees that are inside buildings, such as they call that cutouts, so where you'd have to open up part of somebody's building or house and remove the honeybees that have formed a nest inside that. Again, most people don't do that, but if you do, then again, that's a specialty that you can obtain, and some people get paid to do that. So that's, again, another way of getting revenue from beekeeping, should you choose to do that method. Okay, so we talked about swarm prevention. So if you see swarm cells, then you know to apply the Demery method if you don't want a swarm. Now, if you want to create an artificial swarm, which is a split, when you make a split, that's what you're doing. You're basically creating an artificial swarm. Then know what causes a swarm cell, know what causes swarm cells to be formed to begin with. And the answer to that is when you have congestion in the brood chamber, it's too crowded in there. The workers go, hey, it's too crowded in here, and they will start making queen cells. So you can use that to two advantages. Either A, you can use it to prevent it. So if you notice when you're inspecting your hive, it's starting to get crowded, you can add more boxes and give the bee, the queen, more space to lay eggs, and the bees more room to draw out additional comb for her to lay eggs in, and thus prevent the swarm to begin with. But if you want to do a queen cell split, which is one form of making splits, my favorite split to do, by the way, then you do the opposite. You cause them to get congested in the brood chamber, knowing full well that they are going to make swarm cells because of that. And once you get fully drawn out and capped queen cells, then you can simply make splits with that. It's my favorite split to do. So again, swarm capture and swarm prevention. Swarm prevention, unless you want to force them to make queen cells so you can make splits. Which then brings me to my next topic. You need to learn how to make the various splits. Whether that be a simple equal split where they would make an emergency queen cell, or another type of split is when you make an equal split, but then you put queen cells, either an entire frame that has queen cells on it, or if you learn to cut out around a queen cell without actually damaging the queen cell, you can simply remove the queen cell and then take that queen cell and put it in between two frames. And again, if you join my Beekeepers United group Facebook page, I've got a document in the lessons section in there showing you how to do that process, where you can just simply cut it out and then insert it in between two frames, and then you can make a single queen cell split that way with other frames of bees, or you can simply put the entire frame in there. When you make an equal split, you want at least 4 frames of bees if you can get them. There is a technique where you can do a 2-frame split, but it is highly risky. You'll see videos on the YouTube on how to make 2 frame splits. It's highly risky though. You run the risk of losing those bees if you're not careful and if you're not paying attention to it. Which brings me to my next topic. One of those skills that all beekeepers need to learn in your second year, if you didn't learn it the first year, is how to combine a weak colony with a strong colony. Again, if you go to my Facebook page, I've got an article in there and lesson in there on how to combine a weak colony with a strong colony. And again, coming this spring, I intend to make videos on that. And then the other thing you need to learn in your second year is how to boost a weak colony with products from a strong colony. And again, each of these are different management techniques, and when you apply them is based on what you decide to do. So if I have a congested hive or colony, I can simply make a split using one of those techniques I was talking about, either an equal split or a queen cell split, or another type of split is I make an equal split and then I introduce a mated queen. I go out and buy a mated queen, or I raise my own queens if you are into queen rearing your second year or third year. Anyhow, I make a mated queen. I get a mated queen and I introduce her into that split that is queenless. Again, another technique you need to learn. And then the reason I say you need to learn how to combine a weak colony with a strong colony is if you make a split, or if you make your own queens and something happens to that queen cell when you go to put it in again, what will be called a starter colony or finisher colony rather, I forget the term. Anyhow, when you go to put it in there and you get a cold snap. I had that one year where I made queen cells by grafting. At the time, it wasn't calling for cold weather. And then I put it in there with 3 frames of bees, and I had a cold snap come through and kill my queen cell. So all of a sudden I had 6 queenless colonies all of a sudden because of the cold snap, and there wasn't enough bees in there to keep the queen warm. So a technique is to learn how to recombine or how to combine a weak colony with a strong colony. And that's one of the things in my article that I have in that lesson I was telling you about, where I actually had a strong colony and I combined 2 of those weak colonies that were now queenless because the cold snap killed off 2 of my queen cells. So I was able to successfully combine 3 colonies. That's what I'm trying to say. And then, like I said, the other thing you can do is you need to learn the technique of, if you have a strong colony and a weak colony, one of the things you can do is you can take and donate parts from that strong colony. You can donate bees, you can donate brood, you can open brood and closed cell, cap cells brood. You can also donate pollen, you can donate honey from the strong colony to the strong colony, from the strong colony to the weak colony. The only thing you shouldn't do is you should never introduce a queen to another colony from your strong colony, because obviously you need it for that strong colony. Again, as I was telling you earlier, one of those other techniques that you need to learn your second year, if you didn't learn it the first year, is how to introduce a mated queen. There are a couple ways to introduce a mated queen into a queenless colony, and that is if you take the traditional method, which is you get a queen in a queen cage of some sort, either a JZBZ cage, queen cage, or a Benton cage. And again, on my Facebook page, I've got a beekeeping tools section that shows you pictures of all these different cages. And if I remember after this video, I'll try to include a picture of that in the final product as well. But again, so all you would do in a traditional method is you remove the cork from the candy end of the queen cage, and then you would put that in with the candy portion facing up so that she doesn't get trapped in case a bee, one of the tenants dies in there. And you would simply pinch that in between 2 frames and then introduce her that way. The second method, which I think is a much better technique that I learned from my state apiary inspector, Nancy Rupert in North Carolina, taught me the trick where you use 2 emery shims and you simply place the queen cage on top of the frames, and then you have 2 emery shims that are sitting on top of that brood chamber. And what the 2 emery shims does, it allows the bees to walk on top of that queen cage, and you simply lay it in there flat after removing the cork from the candy end. And it's a much simpler process, and you don't have to worry about the queen cage falling down. It's simply sitting on top of the frames, and you can quickly open up the telescoping top and look in there and see if the workers are still rejecting the queen, or if they've accepted her, or if they've released her. So again, another good skill is learn how to introduce a mated queen into a queenless colony. Again, that's another way to make a split. When you make a split, you can, again, getting back to the splits, you can either make an equal split where you take it and divide the resources. Hopefully you find a queen, but if you don't, that's okay. You're just simply dividing into 2 colonies, in the colony into 2 different colonies. From there, the second one is using a queen cell split. Again, either a single queen cell or an entire frame, and putting it in a box. And again, ideally you have 4 frames of bees in each of the box, plus honey, plus pollen. So that's a queen cell split. And then the third type is simply you take a split, and then you make sure that the queen is not in one of those, and then you simply go out and buy a mated queen, or if you raise your own queens, then you take one of your own mated queens and you introduce her into that queenless hive. And again, that's a third way to make a split. Another trick to learn throughout this year is on-the-spot queen rearing. So when you make a split and you determine which of those hives or the colonies is queenless, one of the things you can do is called cell notching. It was pioneered by a man named Melvin Colon. Again, you'll see these sheets at the very end and his name's on here, but he has this book, On the Spot Queen Rearing, and it is an excellent book that describes on the spot queen rearing. And what he's doing there is he's doing queen cell. He's going in there and notching cells. So basically he goes in there and he takes his hive tool and he creates a notch and pulls it down at a 45-degree angle right below the eggs and doesn't damage the eggs. And what that does, that tricks the workers into going, hey, we need to put a queen cell here, and they'll draw out 1 or 2 queen cells, or as many as you've got the notch formed, and then from there you can simply take that frame once they've drawn out and capped the queen cells, because again, they'll draw out the queen cells where you put that. It only works if you have a queenless hive. So if you just simply notch the cells and you have a queen right colony, it means there's a mated laying queen in there. It's all they're more likely going to do is they're simply just going to repair the cells. So if you find, when you make your split and you've determined which one is queenless, you go in there and make that cell notch. They're going to draw out queen cells. You'll know which frame has the queen cells because you're going to mark the top of the frame. And then you can use that as part of a queen cell split. Very cool trick. Again, I showed you the book on how to do that. Next thing you might want to learn is pest management. So in your first year, if you were like me, you didn't have to deal with small hive beetles or wax moths. Your second year, there's a good chance if they didn't find your apiary the first year, there's a good chance that the small hive beetles and the greater wax moths will find your apiary and they will destroy your honey, they'll destroy your drawn comb because they both eat different things. The small hive beetle is going after the honey, and the wax moths is going after the cocoons that's inside the cells, the brood chamber comb. So again, if you know what each one of those is for, you can know how to mitigate it. So you need to learn what the pest is. Again, I highly recommend you learn the scientific terms for those as well. And then you need to learn the management techniques for those. So how to prevent them to begin with, either by traps for the mineral traps for the small hive beetles, or for the wax moths, placing your hives in a certain area. And then once you find evidence of them, cocoons, eggs, things like that, or if you actually see the larvae, then you need to take care of that. Again, or if you are going to store comb for the season, your drawn comb, you need to learn that technique as well. So if you simply store your drawn comb for the summer or the fall, whenever you're done with it, there's a good chance if you just leave it out in the open in a storage building, the wax moths are going to go in there and destroy it. And then basically you've ruined everything and it's not usable. So one of the things that you need to do is learn how the management techniques, then you need also learn how to store the drawn comb in your second year. There are a couple ways of storing drawn comb. First one is by using paramoth. It's similar to wax moth crystals, but it's not the same as your closet wax moth balls. So don't go buy those at your local store and think that's what it is. This is actually comes in a little plastic canister, and it's actually crystals. Again, it smells very similar to mothballs, but again, you can simply use that and put it in a tray, enclose your comb. Again, it's only used with drawn comb with no bees, no brood on it, and you can store it over. Disadvantage to that, and I don't use it, and I highly discourage people from using it. It's my opinion. Notice the technique I'm using is my opinion, simply because it is a pain in the tush to use. When you go to do it, you have to take those frames out and you have to air them out for about 3 weeks. I know some beekeepers that will use and put fans on that to blow air through it to get some of that wax moth residue or the wax paramoth crystal residue and debris, whatever it leaves on it as it evaporates and then goes throughout and covers it. Again, you have to, book answer is you need to air it out for 3 weeks before you use it to put it back on your hives. I personally don't use it because I've also seen some studies that suggest paramoth can lead to cancer. Again, it's just one study that I saw, but again, it's enough to scare me off of it. Obviously, it's still in use by the FDA, so again, buyer beware on that. I personally will never use it. Whenever I'm mentoring people, I tell them pros and cons. So the second technique, if you don't want to go the paramoth method, one, because it's a pain in the tush because you have to air it out, and two, it's potentially carcinogenic. Again, buyer beware, whether you believe it does or not. I'm tending to lead it, I tend to believe that there's a good chance of it. So I'm staying away from it. The other thing you can do is you can go to Facebook Marketplace or your local ads and buy used freezers, either a chest freezer or a vertical freezer, and depending on the number of hives you have, number of stock of comb, drawn comb that you want to put in there, you can store that. For example, I've got 2.5 freezers. I've got a vertical freezer and a chest freezer, and then I've got a refrigerator that has a freezer in it that I can store drawn comb in. If the bees aren't using it, I can store it in that for overwinter with it. Or if I have excess honey that I don't want to extract and I want to save that honey to give back to my own bees, never take honey and give it to another beekeeper to feed in their hives, because you run the risk of spreading American foul brood. So never take honey from some other beekeeper and put it in your hive unless you know that beekeeper. And then I would still second guess that. Simply because of the American foul brood threat. Again, American foul brood is not harmful to to humans, but it is harmful to the honeybees, and the spores can live for decades, and you can't destroy the spores by alcohol or anything like that. Again, when you learn the diseases and pests, you will learn that. So one of the things you can do is you can use a chest freezer or a freezer, and if you have small hive beetles or wax moths, either the larvae or the eggs or the cocoons, you can simply put those frames or the entire box, if you have room in it, and freeze it for 3 days, and it will kill that. If you want to store honey, you can actually freeze the honey on the frame, and then when you have the spring nectar flow and they produce all that honey, you can put some of that in a freezer, freeze it, and then when you get ready to give it to them for winter stores, you simply take it out and let it thaw out for a day or two, and then you can put it on the hive and let them have it for winter stores. If you leave the honey supers on throughout the year, there's a good chance they'll consume that honey during the summer. I learned that lesson the hard way my first year, so I just left everything on there, and they consumed it during the summer months. So I should have been feeding them sugar syrup during the summer and then holding back the honey to give it back to them during the winter. Lesson learned the hard way from me. All right, so we talked about pest management and then how to mitigate it, what they are, preferably the scientific terminology, and then how to get rid of it. We also talked about drawn comb storage, either brood comb, again without the brood in it, or the paramoth. The other thing you can do with the advantage to a chest freezer, one of the integrated pest management techniques, IPM, is when you determine your mite counts, one of the ways that you can actually mitigate mites too, besides using the various chemicals, either synthetic or organic, such as Formic Pro, or the essential oil based, such as the ApiGuard, ApiLifeVar, all these type things. Again, you go through the Master Beekeeping Program, you need to know all those various mite treatments. One of the things you can do as part of the integrated pest management strategy is you can buy a drone frame. What this is typically a green colored plastic frame, and then what it does is it causes the bees to draw out drones, and then from there it's called drone trapping, this technique. As in, you can take that comb, fully drawn capped drone frame, and put it in a freezer and then freeze that, and because the varroa mite prefers going into drone cells because they can make 1 or 2 more mites than they can when they go into the worker cells. So one of the tricks is you can take those drone specific frames and then put them in a freezer for a few days. It kills off the drone, sucks to be those drones, but then you simply take it out, let it thaw out, put it back in the hive, the bees will uncap it, remove all the drones, and start the process all over again. So in theory, you're basically suckering the varroa mite into using those frames and not as much of your regular frames that have drone on them. Again, it's not as effective as using the other methods, such as brood interruption, such as trapping your queen for a few days to basically stop her from laying eggs, and then it breaks the brood cycle. That's what it does. or using any of the other chemical treatments or the essential oil-based chemicals to kill the varroa mites, depending on what you decide on what your stance is. My personal stance is, everybody's different. My personal stance is I will never use synthetic chemicals such as Apistan, because I don't want that chemical residue going into any comb that potentially the bees might lay honey in or make honey in. I don't want a chance of that coming in contact and I not realize it's in there. Even though you're supposed to take the honey supers off, I don't want to run that risk. One of the things I do is I've got a foundation press where I can make my own beeswax foundation, and I don't want to have reused wax that potentially has chemical residue left in it. So I always use formic acid or the brood interruption technique. One of the ways of making brood interruption is by making splits. Again, it's another form of it if I use the equal split instead of introducing a mated queen. Again, those are skills that you'll need to learn during your second year. The other thing you can do is you can start on your master beekeeping subspecialties. One of those that, even though it's a master beekeeping subspecialty, you should still learn this whether you go through the master beekeeping program or not, and that is the American Red Cross's course. It's an online course on how to use an epinephrine pen. Remember I talked about during the first video, I talked about if you get stung by a honeybee, you need to know what is life-threatening and requires immediate medical attention and what doesn't. And one of those tools that you can have in your tool bag is if you know how to use an epinephrine pen, you can go to your local doctor and ask them to prescribe to you an epinephrine pen kit, either for a child or for an adult. But you need to attend some kind of training to know what to look for and when to administer that. And a simple remedy for that is to attend to the online American Red Cross's course on how to administer an epinephrine pen. That's about a $35 course of when I looked it up a few days ago. It takes you about an hour to go through the course. You get certificates, one of those master beekeeping specialties. But even if you're not going through the master beekeeping program, it's an excellent course to watch, to pay for and watch, to learn how, in case you get into medical problem, you'll know what to look for and how to treat it. Okay, so that's that page. All right, third page. All right, so from there, those are the basic common skills: making splits, swarm preventions, maybe causing congestion to make queen cell splits, how to take brood or any other products from a strong colony and put it to a weak colony, how to combine a weak colony with a strong colony. These are all skills that you need to learn in your second year, regardless of whether you're going through the master beekeeping program or not. So from there you can go in any direction you want. So what I tell my students that are my second year students, whenever they come out, I tell them from there, experiment, channel your inner child. Remember when you were a child and you're curious about everything? Channel that your second year. Experiment. That's how you're going to learn. If you make a mistake, if you go back and you remembered what I was talking about, if you learn how to combine a weak colony or how to take a strong colony and boost a weak colony, if you experiment with various management techniques and you get into trouble, you see that the bees are, the numbers are dwindling, you can go back and use one of those two techniques to boost a weak colony with strong colonies equipment and parts, brood, honey, pollen, anything except for the queen, drawn comb, etc., etc. Or you can simply combine the weak colony back with this thing. The other thing, you need to learn the concept. If you didn't learn it the first year, you definitely need to learn it second year, and that is don't panic. When you're going through and you're inspecting, don't panic if you don't see the queen. Remember, if you see the queen, if you see eggs, you know that she was there. So if you don't take anything else away from this video, take away this. When you're doing your inspection, if you see eggs and you've got at least 3 frames of bees, nurse bees in there, don't panic, because if you accidentally kill the queen, as long as they have eggs and young larvae, they can make an emergency queen. So if you take nothing else away from it, take that away. Don't panic as long as you've got eggs and at least 3 frames of nurse bees, because they can take a larvae that's up to 3 days old and make an emergency queen if they need to, or emergency queens, plural, if they need to. So remember, it's an egg for 3 days and then it's a larvae. So if you see eggs, you know it's an egg for 3 days, and then they're going to select a larvae up to 3 days old. So you know as soon as the egg falls over and it closes into a larva, the bees are going to select one of those and make their own emergency queens. So take that away, learn that, and don't panic if you don't see your queen or if you accidentally drop your queen and lose her during an inspection. All right, so as I was telling you, from there, after you've learned those basic second-year skills, then you can go in any direction you want. Experiment. Experiment with the on-the-spot queen rearing. Experiment with the various splits. From there, again, your world is your oyster, so to speak. So some of the things that you can do, this list is not all inclusive, but here we go. So one of the first things you might be interested in doing is, instead of going out and buying all this expensive woodenware, learn how to make it yourself. Again, if you go to my Facebook page, I'm not trying to plug my own Facebook page, but it's free and there's a lot of stuff on there. If you go to my Facebook page, Beekeepers United Group, it's at the end of this video, it tells you the web page, and I also try to put it in the description so you can just copy and paste it. I've got in the file section, I've got an article in there on beekeeping tips and beekeeping time and money saving tips. And one of the things I discuss in there is how to make your own beekeeping woodenware. At some point in the future, I will make videos and articles on how to make specific equipment, but that article talks about how to set up your templates, and it shows you what equipment that I use. To make your own woodenware doesn't require a lot of carpentry skills. I've got some basic tools. I've got a table saw and a sliding compound miter saw, and I've got some calibration tools. And then I make my own woodenware. It's fun. It's actually a fun project to do. And you can make your own woodenware for about half or less. For example, if you buy a hive body, it's going to cost you, depending on where you buy it, whether it's a deep or medium, it's going to cost you about $12 to $15. I can make that hive body for about $8.50 prior to the wood prices being gouged up. I don't know what they are right now because I've got about 20 or 30 pieces of lumber sitting up in my storage room where I keep it. I buy it when it's I get it half off. I buy damaged. And that article will tell you where and how to get cheap lumber. Again, I make my own woodenware. When you make your telescoping, if you were to buy a telescoping top, it's going to cost you about $22 to buy that telescoping top. I can make that for about $1.50 to $1.80 because I don't use metal, and I use 2 to 3 coats of paint, and I'm using unprotected wood I can't talk. Unprotected plywood. You know, the protected wood has the doggone it, termite treated stuff. So I use, there you go, that's the word, sorry, untreated plywood for the top, and then I use for the side pieces on a telescoping top. I use that scrap wood that when I made the hive bodies, I use the scrap wood from that. If you were to go buy a sloped landing board hive stand, it's going to cost you about $12. You can make it for about $3, $3.50, the way I make it. Again, it's mostly scrap except for that front landing board. And again, I make that on a table saw, and I make that with a sliding compound miter saw. Again, so you can either make it and use it yourself, the equipment yourself, or you can make it and sell it. So again, another way to make money to help support your hobby. Or if you're a sideliner or eventually become a commercial beekeeper, then you can use that as well. The other thing you can do your second year is maybe you want to learn how to increase your colonies and sell nucleus colonies. In my area in North Carolina, a nucleus colony is going to run you about $180 to $190, depending on who you buy it from. So if you learn how to make these splits, or if you get into queen rearing, and you can make your own queens, and you can sell the queens, they go for about $35 in North Carolina right now. And you can add another $5 to $10 if you learn how to mark the queen. I've got a video on that, on queen marking cages, is the title of the video. But I teach you how to mark a queen without having to pick her up. So again, you can increase your colonies. And a good book on that is by Dr. Connor. It's called Increase Essentials. He talks about how to increase your numbers, and he talks about queen banking and a whole bunch of other things in there. It's a really, really good book. Again, it's called Increase Essentials by Lawrence John Connor. Again, so you can sell your bees and start making money that way. You can sell your queens if you learn queen rearing. Again, they go for about 35 bucks in North Carolina. Add another $5, $10 if you mark her. The other thing you can do is learn, maybe you want to learn how to mark queens. Remember, if you watched my previous video, I talked about the pros and cons of queen marking. If you watch that video on queen cages, I talk about there's pros and cons to marking a queen. If you mark a queen, there's a chance when you introduce her back into the colony that colony will reject her. I lost a good queen about 3 years ago by that. I was teaching myself how to mark queens, and I marked her and put her back in the cage, back in her colony. And 4 days later, when I went in that colony to teach a mentee or student how to inspect a hive, she was dead because they killed her. They thought something was wrong with her and they killed her. So there's some risk if you mark a queen. A lot of times they don't. They just simply either try to clean it off of her or they ignore it. But there's a chance that they can kill her. They'll reject her and kill her. So, but one of the tricks you can learn this year in your second year is on queen marking. So you can either do it by using the queen cages that I showed you in that video that I was talking about on queen cages, or if you want to handle the bees themselves, you can actually pick the queen up by her wings and then transfer her so that just her thorax is exposed and you're not holding on to her wings, because when you got her wings, you're blocking where you need to paint her. But you can pick her up by her wings and then transfer her to your other fingers, your finger and your index finger and your thumb, and then you can mark her and then put her back in. But if you're skittish about picking up the honeybees because you don't want to get stung, you're a little skittish, then if you use that techniques that I taught you in the queen marking cages, if you use a one-handed queen catcher, is basically what I'm getting to, or there's other cages as well, you can actually capture her in that one-handed catcher, queen catcher, and then mark her in that and then release her once the paint's dry. Again, so learn those techniques. If you want to practice marking queens and you want to do it the old school method where you're picking the queen up and then just marking her with bare hands and your pen, you can practice on drones. Because remember, a drone does not have a stinger, so you can pick up a drone because he can't sting you, and then you can practice on him while you get used to how to pick it up, how much pressure to apply to him, to the bee without crushing it, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing you can do, if you want to really get into queen rearing, is you can do one or two types of queen rearings. Either you can attend the North Carolina State Beekeepers Associations or your states, if you're in a different state, if they offer some kind of grafting course. In North Carolina, it's called the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association's Born and Bred Queen Rearing Program. They'll typically offer that once or twice a year. Because of COVID right now, it may or may not go on, but look on the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association's website periodically and see if they're offering that course. Also, if you attend your local chapters, they'll generally announce it when it's going to be happening as well. Excellent course on how to graft. The second type of queen rearing that you might get into is they call it instrumental insemination. So basically you're going in and you're taking specialized tools. It's a very expensive course, usually about $600 to $700 to attend the course. Then you have to provide your own equipment, or you have to rent the equipment, and that equipment runs anywhere from $1,000 to as much as you want to pay for it to buy the equipment. Plus you have to pay for travel expenses and lodging to attend one of these courses. They're typically taught at colleges and universities if you can find it. Susan Kobe out in, I think she's in Washington State, if I remember correctly, or Oregon, I think she's in Washington State, has an excellent course on it when you can get to it, when she offers it. But again, some of the universities, I won't say a lot, some of the universities will teach. And I know North Carolina State University occasionally offers a instrumental insemination course. Penn State occasionally will offer it. So again, you have to look around. But again, if you are into very specific genetics, or if you want to sell higher end queens, I know somebody, I know one of the master beekeepers in North Carolina that actually orders specialty queens, stock queens, and then he'll sell his queens for a couple $100. But he's also paying for that initial queen. He's paying about $3,000 to $4,000 for that queen. Sometimes I've heard him say he's gotten one as low as $2,000, but he's buying it for very specific genetics, and he's controlling the purposes of doing instrumental insemination is to control the genetics, breeding for certain traits. So they get very specific queens, and then they get very specific drones, and they use those to mate, draw out the sperm from the various drones, and then they inseminate it into the queen, into a virgin queen, again, through the method called instrumental insemination. Very expensive course, very expensive equipment. So most of you, if you're going to get into queen rearing, are probably going to go with queen grafting, which is much simpler, a lot cheaper to buy the equipment, and it's actually kind of fun. Once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty easy to do. Again, another plug for the North Carolina State Beekeeper Association. Born and bred queen rearing program. Excellent course to go to. I think it's a 1 or 2 day course. Excellent course to go to it if you get a chance. And they'll give you a book, like a pamphlet like this. They change the cover every year, but basically here's what it looks like. Again, they change the cover every year. Okay, so if you want to learn other things about queen rearing, again, if you're in the research phase, another book, couple books are by, again, Lawrence John Connor. Love his books. He's a doctor. Really good expert in our beekeeping industry. So a couple of his books are Queen Rearing Essentials and then Bee-Sex Essentials, both about queen rearing. One is what the bee is about, the anatomy and physiology of what's going on, and the other one's actually about creating queen cells and starter cells and all these things. So both really good books. And then I already talked to you about the on-the-spot queen rearing. I didn't talk about earlier the swarm essentials. So again, if you're into, one of the things you want to learn is how to capture swarms and what causes swarms. This is a really good book on swarms. Again, it's by Stephen J. Rapasky, but it's with Lawrence John Connor as part of the authors as well. All right, so I talked about making and selling your own woodenware. I talked about Nucleus colonies to sell them. I talked about queen marking. I talked about queen rearing either by grafting or by instrumental insemination. The next thing you can get into, should you choose to go down that road, is products of the hive. I'll just lump it into a massive grouping, and then I'll talk about each individual. But it's basically anything that deals with anything products of the hives. And what that is making, selling products such as anything that's made out of beeswax, anything that's made out of propolis, extracting and making various products out of propolis. You can obviously use the honey, extracted honey, and there's lots of different categories. So extracted honey, chunk honey, cut comb honey, creamed honey, and you need to learn, if you're going to use creamed honey, you need to look up and learn the DICE method, D-Y-C-E, D-Y-C-E method, DICE method of making creamed honey. It's crystallized honey. Again, because it will sell at a higher premium. Creamed honey sells at a higher premium, typically about $20 for a pound versus $12 for a pound of just regular extracted honey. Cut comb honey sells for a higher premium than extracted honey. Again, I'll get more specifics about this. So, honey extraction. Again, hopefully you didn't extract honey in your first year and put your bees at risk, but if you did and you got away with it, good on you. But if you're watching this and you're still in the research phase, we highly recommend that you do not extract honey your first year. The second year or beyond is the time that you can do that, because at that point they've drawn out enough resources to they've got the drawn comb and they're starting to they've got the resources to quickly fill that and make honey out of it. So you need to learn the 2 different types of methods of honey extraction, whether that be the crush and strain method, where especially those of you who have a top bar hive that has a triangle shape comb, or if you're using the Worry hive, which is a 3-sided frame, and where you can't use a honey extraction equipment with that because it doesn't have that bottom bar on it. But if those of you who are using the Langstroth hive or the long Langstroth, which is a horizontal hive, then you may not need to use the crush and strain method. When you use the crush and strain method, you're destroying the comb. The bees can't reuse it. So by using a Langstroth hive or a long Langstroth hive, we're using the traditional Langstroth frames, or actually the man frames. And then there's, I forget the other inventor of the frame, but basically it's a full frame. You can use a honey extractor. You can either use a hand crank extractor or use an electric motor extractor, which is what I highly recommend, because I guarantee the first year you use a hand crank extractor and you extract a lot of honey, you're going to go buy the upgrade kit for it to convert it to an electric extractor. Then you need to learn how much honey you're going to extract. For example, I bought a 6-9 extractor from Maxent. It can hold 6 frames radially. Think spokes of a wheel as the frames are going out. And the other method is tangentially. If you got a spoke of wheel going this way, the frame is going perpendicular to that. So in a Maxent 6-9 extractor, it's about $900 now with the kit, the leg kit. I can extract 6 frames radially, and I can extract 3 more tangentially if I choose to do so. Okay, so again, learn the different extraction techniques. If you don't want to invest in your own extractor, when you join your local chapter, ask them if they have a club's extractor. If not, if your local chapter doesn't have equipment that they can let members use, ask if there are any members in the club that will help you use or let you use their extractor. A lot of times members in a club will either just let you use it, period, or they'll let you use it if you let them keep the cappings from that as part of the price for it and not charge you for it. So again, check your resources at your local chapter. And again, learning how to extract honey is actually kind of a fun skill. Again, I'll show a photo of this in the final product, if I remember, of one of my mentees learning how to extract honey with me. It's actually kind of fun. It's messy, but it's fun. Okay, so when you extract your honey, then you can sell it. So again, you can either sell it either on your own, if you create your own business, you can sell it that way. It's one of the master beekeeping subspecialties if you create your own business. Or you can go to your local stores and see if they're interested in buying local honey, and you can sell it that way. Or you can go to farmers markets and sell it that way. If you sell honey, it is critical that you learn your local laws, your state and federal laws on honey labeling, because there are very specific laws that govern what goes on, what information goes on a honey label. So you need to make sure, and you also need to know this if you're going through the Master Beekeeping program. It's part of your practical exam. It's also part of your written exams. So you need to know what goes on that label. It's very specific information and very specific font sizes that it goes in to put on a label. Okay. If you are in North Carolina and you want to sell honey, if you volunteer to be a volunteer at the North Carolina's zoo in the Honeybee exhibit, one, it gives you service credits and potentially a master beekeeping specialty. One of the things that they allow the beekeepers to do is to sell their honey there at that exhibit. So they'll typically, when I did it several years ago, they had 3 positions a day that they would allow. Two beekeepers to run the exhibit, to talk about the exhibit, and 1 beekeeper that was allowed to sell honey. So you'd be able to drive your car up, unload the honey, and then drive your car back to the parking lot, and you could sell your honey there at the North Carolina Zoo. So, and again, another revenue stream should you want to. So books on honey. There are some, I'll point you in the right direction. My opinion on what's right, you determine what's right on your own. I'll get a little closer. So some good books on determining flavors of honey. This is called the Honey Connoisseur. And I'll put it a little closer. The Honey Connoisseur by C. Marina Marchese and Kim Flottam. It talks about the different plants and the different flavor profiles of the honey. Good book. Another one is the Honey Handbook. Similar. It talks about different plants and what the honey flavor profile is. It's not as in-depth as that other book, but this book also talks about different things that you can do with the honey. It talks about extracting. It also talks about some recipes. So those of you who like cooking with honey, this is a good book that has some recipes in it for you. Okay, other books on honey. This book is Honey, the Gourmet Medicine. This is a really good book that tells a lot of medicinal uses for honey. And it tells you, again, it's a really good book on, talks about the using honey as a medicine. It talks about for burns. It talks about for stomach problems. It's a really good book. It's Honey, the Gourmet Medicine by Joe Traynor, Traynor. Next book, again on honey, a book of honey by Eva Crane. Eva Crane is another well-respected person in the beekeeping industry. She's now passed away, but she produces really good books. This is a really good book on the history of honey, how it's made. It gives a lot of scientific stuff behind the honey and the honey process. Really good book. She has several books on this. This is one of my recommend for you. Again, A Book of Honey by Eva Crane, E-V-A, and her last name is Crane, C-R-A-N-E. She also has excellent books on history. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so that's on honey. The natural extension of honey is if you want to learn how to make mead, which is alcohol. I don't drink, so I can't have much of a frame of reference for this. But there are a couple of good books from what I've been told on making your own mead. So a couple of books that you can get off of Amazon is Making Your Own Mead. It says 43 recipes for making homemade honey wines. It's by Brian Acton and Peter Duncan. The other one is The Complete Mead Maker by Ken Schramm. Again, I've been told that these are excellent starter books. Again, I don't drink, so I don't have any reference for it. But again, good books if you want to make your own mead. As far as selling it, I would research the laws on selling alcohol. Again, I have no frame of reference because I don't drink. Okay, so those are the books on honey and mead, natural extension. The next topic you may consider in your second year or your third year is using the various, beeswax for different products. There are a lot of books. There are a lot of things that you can use for beeswax. One, you can make your own foundation, save yourself some money maybe. You can make cosmetics is most common. So you can make lip balm, you can make deodorant, you can make different hair products, you can make mustache balms. There are a lot of books on that. You can also make soap, make really good lavender soap with beeswax and then essential oils. So again, these are all things you can use that beeswax for. If you go down that route of using scented candles or scented soaps, if you look up Lorann oils, Lorann oils, they make a lot of candy making supplies and they sell essential oils and things like that for soap making and things like that. But the reason I'm mentioning that, if you go to Lorann oils, and again, I'll have the link in this on the final version. I'll try to remember to put the link in the description as well. But if you go to Lorann oils and you ask to become a wholesaler or get wholesale prices, If you tell them that you are a beekeeper, they will sell their products to you at the wholesale cost instead of retail. So you can get discounted candy making supplies and again, the essential oils. Again, LoranOils.com. The other thing you can do is you can take the beeswax and you can make different crafts. Again, Virginia Webb, I saw her come to North Carolina and enter one of our competitions. She made a beautiful beeswax bowl, got first place obviously because she's an expert at it. But again, there are various things you can make. You can make candles. There's lots of things you can make with beeswax. If you're going to make cosmetics, you're going to find that they're going to recommend that you use the cappings that come off the honey as opposed to the cappings that come out or the processed wax when you take the wax from the brood chambers when they're empty and you extract out, filter out the debris such as the cocoons and all the poop and all those other things that the bees cover over with propolis. When you refine all that out, filter all that out, you're left with a solid chunk of beeswax, and then you can use that for your lotions and things like that. All right, some good books on that. All right, so starting off least to best. So this is the Bee Book, The Wonder of Bees, How to Protect Them, and Beekeeping Know-How, but it's called the Bee Book. Again, it gives you a whole bunch of history, and then it talks about how to make different projects. It talks about flowers and different things, and it actually gives you some formulas and stuff, and things, how to melt the beeswax, how to make candles, things like that. How to use sunburn, you can make sunburn lotion with it. Again, it's a decent starter book. A couple better books, I think, than those are, again, you'll see these at the bee conferences for a reason, because they're very popular books. First one is called the Beekeepers Lab. Again, various things that you can do with the beeswax, as its name implies. Also, things that you can do with honey. Again, it's called the Beekeepers Lab. The second one, that's very popular, is Beeswax Alchemy. Again, another very popular book. This one's by Petra Onhart. Again, Beeswax Alchemy. Very popular book on beeswax crafts. And I think it even goes into soap making, if I remember right. Again, good book. All right, another thing that you can do in the products of the hive category is collecting and using propolis. Remember, some species of bees are very good at producing propolis. All bees are going to produce propolis. Some are better than others. So I think it's the Caucasians that have excessive, are known for making excessive propolis. So if you're one of these people that like to use propolis to make tinctures, or maybe you don't know how to do it and maybe you get interested in it, you can make tinctures, T-I-N-C-T-U-R-E, to use to treat cold sores. I know some people that will take a dropper full of that as a preventative medicine. Again, a good book. It's getting harder to find this book. It's called Bee Propolis, Natural Healing from the Hive, and it's by James Fernley. Again, really good book. When I bought this is like 12 bucks. I saw it once before for about $100 and some. So it's getting hard to find, but it's a really good book. It's a very old book. In some of these other books I mentioned, they will also talk about various uses for propolis. So again, they make specific screens to capture the propolis. Basically, you can take a plastic queen excluder and you put it up on top as well, and then prop up the telescoping top. It causes sunlight going in. The bees will fill in all those gaps in that plastic queen excluder or a propolis trap if you have one. And then from there, you take it and put it in your freezer like you would an ice cube tray. Let it freeze, let that propolis become hard, and you take it out and you snap it on the ground, or on a counter rather, or you twist it and it pops that propolis out and you got refined propolis. Or you can simply take the propolis and scrape it off and then try to refine it from there. Some people actually sell the propolis in that form on Amazon, but they advertise it with wood shavings in it. But again, there's a cleaner version. If you simply use a propolis trap, you can actually get clean propolis. Again, you can use it for, there's a lot of things you can use it for. You can use it for salves, propolis salves. You can use it in Propolis tinctures. I've seen somebody advertise Propolis deodorant. Again, these are all things you can use with beeswax and then incorporating Propolis into it. All right, so the next thing you can do, and I'm almost done, I promise, is you can collect and sell pollen. If you go down that route of buying or collecting and selling pollen, I highly encourage you to buy additional insurance, because when you sell something that a human consumes, especially pollen, because you run the risk of pesticide poisoning being in that, because you never know where your bees are foraging for, you need to get additional insurance to protect yourself in case somebody wants to sue you. Again, this is not coming from me. This is coming from several books I've read that also recommend if you do that. In addition to that, if you choose to buy a pollen trap, then you need to go around to your various neighbors, especially those who are farmers, but especially your nearby neighbors, because they could also use pesticides. Not so much herbicides. There aren't too many herbicides that can harm honeybees, but pesticides, especially your farmers. You need to go around and tell them and say, hey, I'm raising honeybees and I intend to collect pollen. Do you mind not using chemicals that are harmful to the honeybees? And if they say no, or if they say they're going to do it, like I was planning on that my first year, so I bought a pollen trap, and then I went around talking to my various neighbors. I had one farmer, it's about 2 miles from me. Remember, honeybees will forage up to 5 miles. I had one farmer that says, I don't care about you raising honeybees. I'm going to use the pesticides because I'm raising my crops and I want to protect my crops from the various pesticides, or from the various pests. So I'm going to use my pesticides. So that put a screeching halt to my pollen trap business that I was wanting to do. So again, consider the pros and cons of that if you go down that route. All right, so a couple other things I'm going to talk about, and then I'm almost done, is your second year, if you choose to do so, maybe you want to have a observation hive and you install it in your house. I'm not talking about the little observation hive that a lot of master beekeeper candidates go through, and they put a single frame in there in the top to observe, and then they got several frames and they take it around to teach with. I'm talking about an actual dedicated hive that's, it typically holds 2 to 4 frames in there or more, depending on how big this thing is, and they'll drill a hole into their house, and they'll store this observation hive in a room, and then they have a tube leading outside. Or some people will put the observation hive on the outside, and they'll have insulation panels to overwinter the bees with. And again, they have a tube going out to where the bees can escape and go to the outside. But again, observation hive is really cool. It's a good way to learn what the bees are doing anyway. Again, if you're into that, maybe that's something you consider your second year. You can buy the observation hive pre-made, and then you have a carpenter come in and install it for you. Again, something to consider. All right, lastly, for those of you who are history buffs, I haven't forgot about you, and I've got something for you. So again, your second year, maybe you're one of these people that as part of your service credits, you go around and start teaching. So one of the things you can do is maybe look for a couple of good books on the history of beekeeping. So if you are into American history, beekeeping history, there's an older book called The History of American Beekeeping by Frank C. Pellet. Inexpensive book on Amazon, less than $20 if I remember right. I think it was about $10 when I bought it. Good book on American beekeeping. Old black and white drawings and photos. Again, cool book if you're a history buff like I am. An excellent book if you are into history and you're a little bit of a history nerd like me. An excellent book is by Eva Crane. It's called The World History of Beekeeping and Honey Hunting by Eva Crane. When I bought this book, it was $100. Well worth it, in my opinion. It's probably the most comprehensive book on honeybees history that you will find. She did a lot of research on it. I forget how many pages it is, 682 pages or so. Excellent book on the history of honeybees keeping throughout the world. Excellent book if you can find it. All right, so for those of you who stuck around with me for this long, again, I know it's a long video. I promise I will have some shorter videos in the future. And I already have some of those videos that are short. But again, for those of you who are looking for a suggested structure for your second, possibly going into your third year, that's the purpose of this video. So just a recap, your first year, you basically were learning how to use equipment, how to put on the equipment, a little bit of management techniques. Your second year is all about expanding your knowledge. And this is where you get to experiment. You need to learn, there are some basic tasks that I talked about early on that all beekeepers, regardless whether they're going through the master beekeeping program or not, need to know. You need to learn about swarms, either prevention or capture. And I think my battery's about to go. So for those of you, yeah, I see my battery's about to go. So those of you who stuck around this long, thank you for sticking around, and God bless you. Have a great day.